We are live here in Washington, D.C. I am joined with Congressman Matt Gaetz of Florida. Now, Matt, the last time our crew came to D.C., we actually took over Marjorie Taylor Greene's studio, had a great time, but you said, you know what, this time, let's take over yours.
Well, it's an honor to have you here, and you know, it's very important to continue to communicate about the challenges that the people are having. And so I'm glad to partner with Marjorie on a lot of issues where, yeah, we want to get behind the microphone, get in front of a camera, and tell people the truth. And that's why I'm always so grateful to partner with Right Side Broadcasting.
That's awesome. All right, we've got a lot to go over today. We were here in town in anticipation of the Supreme Court ruling on the Dobbs case out of Mississippi. Now, that did not happen today. There was a couple of judgments. We'll talk about those here in a little bit. But we'll be live tomorrow at 9:30 Eastern in front of the Supreme Court for yet, hopefully, another decision day, and we'll find out exactly if that happens. But we've got a lot to go over today, a lot going on in our world right now, a lot going on here in Washington. Now, just moments ago, you appeared in front of the J6 committee, or they were talking about you.
That's right.
And all of your allegations of standing up for the election in 2020, and they played a soundbite. Now, this is, you know, hey, how do we respond to this? Is a clown show to begin with, but what's your response to that?
Well, the January 6th Unselect Committee just played remarks that I gave before January 6th, where I expressed my desire to object to electors that came from states where the law had changed at the last moment, where there were chain of custody questions over the ballots. And they used this to try to make the argument that there was some sort of unique and unprecedented pressure that members of Congress were putting on democracy. Here's my response. You know, the last president that was a Republican that got sworn in without Democrats objecting to their electors? George H.W. Bush. Okay, they objected to the state of Alabama when President Trump won it, and he won Alabama by over 40 percentage points, and Jim McGovern objected to that. So it has long been part of the history of Congress to use the process of objecting to electors so that you can ripen important questions and you can make points on principle. And that's what we sought to do, and we sought to introduce evidence. And unfortunately, our effort to use a legitimate constitutional process was interrupted by a riot. And that's not something we ever want to see. We want to be able to resolve our disputes with our words and with constitutional process. And I still have a lot of concerns about election integrity going forward.
Sure.
There was a great piece by Molly Hemingway in the Federalist today about different steps that Joe Biden was using to try to steal the 2022 midterms. And so we have to be vigilant. I will note that the member of Congress sort of quarterbacking the January 6th committee right now is Adam Kinzinger. And I remember Adam Kinzinger begging me to try to get Donald Trump to appoint him to be Secretary of the Air Force. So this is a whole lot of somebody who I think is very personally bitter over the fact that he wasn't selected for a position. Trust me, if Donald Trump would have selected Adam Kinzinger for Secretary of the Air Force, Adam Kinzinger was ready to drink Donald Trump's bathwater to make that happen. And now he's a bitter little man putting on a ridiculous show.
Matt Gaetz joining us as we're live here in Washington, D.C. in our nation's capital. We're going to go over a lot of stuff now. You were also here last night late into the hours, 2, 3 in the morning, on a very important bill in regards to our military and kind of what it means to not only the wokeness and how they've doubled down on the wokeness of our military. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, at 2 a.m. this morning, the National Defense Authorization Act moved out of the House Armed Services Committee, and we are increasingly dealing with issues in the construct of military policy that I think we never really thought we would have to deal with. And I know I've got constituents who watch Right Side, who are active duty military, who are recent veterans, because they tell me they do when we have these discussions, and they're very concerned about this wokeism. And now the military is actually trying to extend that to any defense contractor that is providing a service to support the warfighter. Now, I think we would agree we want those supporting the warfighter to be chosen based on capability, based on the ability to kill our adversaries and break their stuff and
not
protect
choose
America.
The right pronouns. And we all saw that video.
So could you imagine a world in which the company making the smartest drone or the best body armor or managing telecommunications security wasn't picked primarily on capability, but on what they did for Pride Month and whether or not they had a diversity, equity, and inclusion plan. And so the good news is that we made the argument about how that critical race theory corporatized into diversity, equity, and inclusion programs really, by the data, makes a workforce more animus and more divided, and it actually doesn't contribute to teamwork. Now, that's common sense, but it's also bared out by the data. We flipped 2 Democrat votes. Stephanie Murphy of Florida and Elaine Luria of Virginia voted with the Republicans, and we got the diversity, equity, and inclusion provisions out of the National Defense Authorization Act.
I mean, Matt, think about this for a second. China is planning, they're building their military up. Most of these countries that are against this are building their military up, and we've got training videos of how to address people in our military properly and show proper respect to whatever gender they choose to identify. I never thought we'd ever go down this path. Honest to God, how did we get here?
It's because the DoD was kind of the last bastion of government power that hadn't been just totally taken over by the political left. I mean, you look at the Department of Education, the Department of Labor, the EPA, that was ground that the left had already really seized a generation ago. And you looked at the DoD, and I would probably say the DOJ and the FBI and say, okay, those aren't people who are like kind of signed up for the woke-topian agenda. And now you see how aggressive the left has pursued that turf and the grounds that they've made. And so I believe when Republicans take power again, it's not going to be enough to just stem the tide of this nonsense. We're actually going to have to go on offense to de-wokeify the military and to get rid of these training programs, the pedagogy, anything that tells Americans that you have to be treated differently or you are different or you should be judged based on the color of your skin or your ethnic background. We believe that all Americans are precious and that people ought to be judged by the content of their character. And that color blindness that Dr. King is what a lot of the critical race theorists now critique.
Absolutely. All right, let's go over a couple things. Earlier today, the Supreme Court had a decision in support of gun rights for gun owners in the state of New York, which I think is huge. Let's talk a little bit about that. And I think that feels like a victory. I know I was talking to some conservative friends today. We feel like we won, Matt. We finally won something in a while. But what's your thoughts on that?
Well, and at a time when you see Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and Joe Biden doing everything they can to take gun rights away from the American people, it is nice to see that we're still getting a dividend from the Trump picks to the Supreme Court actually vindicating Second Amendment rights. So this was a totally foreign concept to me as a Florida man, because we're not just the sunshine state, we're the gunshine state. But in blue states, we have a lot of good people who live in blue states, good Americans. And in blue states and in jurisdictions, to get a concealed carry permit, you had to prove to the government that you deserved one and needed one. And self-defense and personal protection alone were never the justification to have a gun. And in the decision that Justice Thomas rendered today, he said, no, there's no constitutional right that you have to prove to the government you need. You get the right. And then there can be, reasonable restrictions. You can't yell fire in a crowded theater. And so, but you don't have to start at bended knee begging the government and proving that you need a constitutional right. And so it's great to see that vindicated, and we will see more of those rights for gun owners across blue America.
I agree. Okay, let's go real quickly talk about John Cornyn, and he got booed in the Texas GOP last weekend when he stepped on stage as an introduction. And of course, him and Mitch McConnell are kind of leading the charge for these red flag laws, which, if I'm not mistaken, they're pretty close to getting this pushed through, right?
Oh, I expect that before the Congress goes on our August recess, that they will send this bill to the president's desk. And it is terrible. It uses the federal tax dollar to bribe states into enacting red flag laws where people don't have the normal adversarial process that you see in our justice system to try to create fairness and to find truth in the outcomes.
Why don't you explain that to us? Because let's just say your neighbor doesn't like you for whatever reason. You had a Trump sign in your yard in 2020. Well, he could report you to the authorities and saying that you're deranged, you looked crazy, he heard you yelling outside at your neighbor or whatever. He could report you. But there's a trial that you're not allowed to attend to defend yourself, and they can determine.
You don't even know it's happening.
You don't even know it's happening.
Yeah.
So let's talk about it. I mean, it's really insane to think about that, because you normally think of red flag laws as if there's someone that's a known, convicted felon or something like that. Oh, well, that guy surely shouldn't have a gun.
Well, in all states, that we don't have a world in which there are state governments embracing felons having guns, right? The states are doing their job there. They don't need Washington to tell them what to do.
This goes way a step further. This is very subjective stuff here.
I mean, yeah, this is literally Washington bribing states to violate the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution. And I see why Texans would be very frustrated with John Cornyn for leading this effort. And listen to how the left talks about this. They always say, well, this is a good first step. And what really frustrates people is when they see Republican leaders who are supposed to be fighting for them and winning their battles just surrendering a little more ground, just a little more of your freedoms, just a little more of the Constitution that you can't access. And that becomes unidirectional, and it crushes our people, and it frustrates them to no end. And so that's what I think you heard regarding Senator Cornyn. As to the substance of those red flag laws, we have them in Florida, and they've been used nearly 8,000 times. Now, I don't think they've stopped 8,000 school shooters. Sure. What I think is that now your Second Amendment rights become part of any dispute you're in. You're in a dispute with your neighbor, they may try to take your guns. You're in a divorce, a dissolution of marriage, that could become leverage for child support or alimony. Yep. You have a problem with a coworker. Maybe you want to red flag them. And your constitutional rights shouldn't be sort of up for this type of a total power grab. Yep. And that's why I'm against them.
Yeah, it's completely subjective. And whether a committee that you're not a part of determines that you're not fit to have a gun, well, that's just on them, and you have no say so. And you can't even defend yourself.
And we're not for crazy people having guns. We have Baker Act laws in almost, I think, in every state in the country where if there's really, this high standard to deprive someone of their liberty over a period of time, and there's an analysis and a review by physicians, I think states have settled on what that ought to look like, but it's not enough for the gun grabbers. They want the Karen living down the street to be able to come for your guns if she's got some woke sheriff who doesn't support the Second Amendment in the first place.
Yeah. Let's stay with the topic of guns. I noticed a headline. You had something to say about it, that the IRS had invested $700,000 in ammo. And I just asked you,
Just this year.
What the hell they need all that ammo for?
I mean, I thought that the heaviest weaponry that an IRS agent would need would be a calculator. Like, you don't typically hear armed and dangerous associated with like a tax cheat, right? But with one hand, you see the Biden government trying to limit access to guns and ammunition for the American people. And with the other hand, they're just scooping up as much of it as they possibly can. So I'm going to be introducing legislation to put a moratorium on the IRS's ability to buy ammunition. Over a 10-year period, they bought $11 million worth of ammo. That is ludicrous. There are only about 2,000 law enforcement agents with the IRS.
Correct.
And I mean, you're talking about like a lot of rounds per agent at that
Each guy
price
is
point.
walking around with a lot of ammo on him.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm for the American people having ammo and guns and stockpiling them if they want to, but I don't think you should have to be an accountant in D.C. to stockpile ammo. You ought to be a mechanic in Pensacola and stockpile ammo if you want to.
Matt Gaetz joining us as we kind of hijack his office here. Nice office, by the way. You got a lot of cool stuff on the wall.
Brian, you're being nice. We're in the attic, and it's because if you don't sell out to the leadership, you end up in the basement or the attic. And in the attic, you at least have some windows occasionally.
You do have some windows, and we have the J6 hearings that are playing above Matt's head. I'm trying to keep an eye on it, but it's such a clown show at this point. It's all the media wants to talk about, and that's my next topic, the media. The media loves to cover you. The media loves to cover you, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Jim Jordan, and all of these, figureheads that really, you punch back, and they're not used to that. How long did it take you to get used to this aggressive, divisive media that we have? I mean, how long did it take you to really realize that you've got to punch back on these guys?
Well, I come from Florida. I was in the Florida legislature for 6 years. They don't pitch underhand there in politics or with journalists. And so I understood that when you come here, you don't work for those folks. And I think a lot of people get elected to Congress and they wake up every day and they say, you know what? If there are no headlines about me at all today, there's a really high likelihood I'm going to be able to keep a job that's the best job I've ever had.
You're right.
My staff all laugh at my jokes. They tell me that I've lost weight.
Right.
I have people drive me
People like
around.
you.
Yeah, you get to go to a lot of ribbon cuttings, and so for a lot of people, just kind of you staying within that bandwidth is their alpha and omega. I believe service in the Congress is a platform to excite people around the changes that we absolutely have to make to save this country. I am very worried about the judgment of history, not from the January 6th committees, but if we allow America to be diminished on our watch. I do not want my generation to be the first that passes down a weaker America. And I see what's happening to our military and our economy and how the world thinks of us. And I'm very worried about it. But I remain hopeful because I saw how fast in my life it could be turned around. We talk about the national malaise now under Joe Biden. I remember how down people were during parts of the Obama presidency. And then President Trump brought back vigor and optimism. And there is a unity that comes with success that I think Americans need to embrace. And if I got a few noses in the media with some tough interviews, I don't mind giving and I don't mind getting.
That's why Matt Gaetz is one of the best ones that we have on the show. Okay, let's talk about the Joe Biden economy. And of course, Joe Biden can come out and say our economy is on pace to outpace China and we're this and that. But when the real numbers come out, that inflation was 8.6% and 10% over last year. I mean, things are not good.
I mean, my constituents yell at me when I tell them that inflation is 8.6% because they say, wait a second, the inflation on my gas is 40%. When I look at my grocery bill, when you look at the essentials, you're talking about multiple times that average. And so the American people are being crushed. And the hypocrisy here is that these Democrats accused us of attacking American institutions under Donald Trump. You know what the most fundamental American institution is? An economy that can give people a dignified life, a U.S. dollar that is strong so that people can predict and save and play by the rules and pass a little something on to the next generation to live a better life. And they want to make us ashamed of that America. They think that America is unsavable, deplorable, intractably racist. But I love an America that is aspirational and that wants to produce things and make things. And Joe Biden is obviously a person in decline who is bringing the country into decline with him. And I think so many Americans see that. And we've got to wake the country up, and we shouldn't be afraid to do so.
Well, the approval numbers say it all. I mean, it's horribly low. And I just saw Vice President Kamala Harris's approval numbers earlier today. They're even lower. Do you think the Democrats, and this kind of brings me to my next talk, do you think the Democrats, they're obviously looking for someone else to take over in 2024? Gavin Newsom, I said a year ago Gavin Newsom would be the nominee. But they can't possibly want Joe to run again.
I think Gavin Newsom and Pete Buttigieg are both sort of presenting themselves as the great white hope of the Democratic Party in a time when Joe Biden is in such a state of decline. But I don't see that occurring. My prediction is that if Joe Biden is not running for re-election and is sort of shuttled out of the way, that you're going to see Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in that race. I mean, she has told me previously she believes she will be constitutionally eligible because she will be of the constitutionally required age when she would be sworn into the job, but maybe not when she was running for it. So could be big news. You could see AOC in this field.
That's the first time I've heard that. And that actually kind of makes sense. But although like I would say that your middle of the road Democrat is looking at her and going, wait a minute, at one point we shared some common values, but now the left has gotten so left. Do you think she has a shot? I mean, do you think enough people can get behind her?
It's real. I try to take one election at a time.
Right.
We got the midterms coming up where I think we got to get the majority. We got to show the American people that the pain they're feeling is connected to the Joe Biden policy agenda. It's not Vladimir Putin's fault.
Yeah.
It's not a global economic condition. You can't keep blaming COVID for failed leadership. And so that's the first thing we have to do. And I think how we manage that majority will actually define the type of both Republican and Democrat candidates. Because if we go roll over to Joe Biden and say, oh, let's do a bipartisan infrastructure bill and let's do some social spending together and start some more wars, like if we do all that, then I think that Joe Biden will have a case to make that he knows how to bring the Republicans to heel. And what I propose as an alternative is that every committee becomes an oversight committee, and we get into the critical race theory pushed by the Department of Education. We get into the vaccine connections that are bizarre at the CDC, the origins of the coronavirus. And if we did all that, I think the American people really would be re-engaged in politics in a way to seize the power that we need for the reforms. Because if we just revert to our establishment mean in the Republican Party, it just won't be that much different than the Democrats, and we won't save America.
There you go. Let's talk about the war in Ukraine. I mean, if you were to walk down to your district there in Florida and line up 100 people and ask them what their top 3 concerns are in their personal life, I don't even think the war in Ukraine's in the top 10, to be honest with you. It doesn't directly affect them. What's your thoughts on that? And what do your constituents say down in Florida about the war in Ukraine?
Well, I have no doubt that my constituents are first and foremost concerned about these economic conditions at their kitchen table when they are making budget decisions for the month that's coming forward, when they're thinking about where their jobs or careers are going in a world in which there's declining business confidence, declining investor confidence, more offshoring, not onshoring. So that makes up the issue matrix for people in my community a great deal. And I just think $40 billion to Ukraine is insane. I mean, the Biden administration only wanted like $15.7 billion for the CBP to secure our own border, for the entire CBP.
And they debated that forever. And like we were giving up everything for that.
When we tried to get a nickel for the wall, they told us walls were racist.
Yes.
And now here they are, giving Ukraine the ability to have extended fire capability into Russia. It's a very different thing than a defensive strategy. And this 40, look, I mean, there are a lot of Ukrainian elites that are getting their taste of some of these weapons. I mean, you see some of these American weapon systems for sale on the dark web. And so, like, if you're the Ukrainian elites, what incentive do you have to wind down this war? Because the moment you wind down the war, you change the construct of the cash pipeline into your offshore bank accounts.
Yeah.
Now, I know the Ukrainian people want this war to end, and they don't deserve this. We want Ukraine to win, and we want Russia to lose, but like not at the expense of the American experience and the American economy. I voted against these oil and gas sanctions because the Biden administration had no plan. I knew this. Marjorie Taylor Greene and Thomas Massie knew this. We voted against those initial sanctions because when we asked questions about the supply and what was going to happen, we knew that the American people would end up paying a disproportionate price for Joe Biden's decisions. And that is exactly what is happening every time you fill up that gas pump.
It does. And when we talk to people at rallies, we talk about the war in Ukraine and the $40 billion. Matt, this is what they tell me. Why can't we take that $40 billion and invest in our schools and keep them safe? And, especially after what happened in Uvalde, Texas. I mean, there's a lot of stuff we could be doing to keep our schools safe, our kids safe, and secure our border with that money, not sending it over to fight another war.
Well, let's talk about school security, because this is an issue that divides some Republicans, and I think well-meaning people can have a different perspective on this. I don't want to federalize the police, and I don't want to federalize the school police. How we think about security strategies is very different in Southern California with open air and a lot of indoor-outdoor space, as opposed to Minnesota, where you can't go outside for many months of the year. And so I think that a national strategy around school security misses the constitutional point as well, that the police power is reserved to the states. And this is clearly a police function. Now, in my beloved Florida, we didn't need the federal government to fund our school security. We made it a state priority, and we have some of the most secure. Well, after Parkland, we had to. And we had to fire the sheriff that didn't have a well-trained officer unit to be able to respond to that. And tragically, life was lost that did not need to be lost. But then there has to be accountability, and there has to be change in policy. And we've changed those policies regarding entry and exit points, regarding fencing, regarding the resourcing of school resource officers. But I don't believe that it is the job of the federal taxpayer to do that, because, oh my gosh, we lose so much efficacy when the money runs through all these federal agencies to finally get where it can be used. I really think that's a function of our state governments.
Let's talk real quickly about crime in America. You look at the top 10 most deadliest cities in this country, they are run by Democrats, and they've seen 30-40% increases in homicides in those cities. And you see what's going on down in Los Angeles. The the district attorney George Gaston, and how he just lets these criminals back out on the street. They go commit another murder. People are fed up with it, and they voted the San Francisco DA out. Is that going to be a trend as we look at some of these cities that are having trouble with the crime? Our citizens, even on the left, are saying, we've got to get a hold of this. We've got to come to a common sense approach with putting away criminals.
It's tragic that in these Democrat-run cities, the people who have trusted their leadership are the ones betrayed the most by it, and whose physical safety and economic security all unravel in these places like Chicago, Los Angeles, where you don't really have a balance of Democrats and Republicans. It's unified control over those governments with Democrats, and we see these no bail reforms that result in people just kind of turnstiling through processing in our criminal justice system rather than any sort of either corrections or accountability in any way. And that results in a higher rate of recidivism and more challenges for our people. And so I'm saddened by it, but it also explains why the Democrats want unchecked illegal immigration.
That's exactly.
Because people are depopulating these cities. More and more people who've been let down by Democrat mayors are saying, I'm out of here, and they're leaving these cities. And so that political unit then says, well, we need new voters to betray. We need new people to
and they've even said that. They've said the quiet part out loud on this. They've admitted what they're doing here.
But when we say that they want unchecked illegal immigration because they've let down the voters that have trusted them the most, they call us racists and say that I'm advancing replacement theory. There's not a racial element to what I'm saying at all. It's a question of the people who haven't gotten the government they've deserved and they've left, and now the government wants to preserve power more than making the changes to actually help people live better lives.
And I think you and I could both agree, Matt, that we are all for a controlled immigration. We want legal immigration. We want people to come to this country and have a better life. Of course. I mean, no one's against that.
But following the rules.
But following the rules.
Yeah. I like having house guests, but I like it when I invite them over. Not when people just kind of walk by my house and feel as though they're entitled to be able to go inside, take any of my food, sit on my couch, change the television channel, and speak in any language they want. Like to me, if we think about America as our home, then we ought to be inviting of people to our home, but we also have to know who is coming and going, and we have to know that they won't be a danger to the people inside. And that is not racist. That does not mean we hate the people on the outside of our home. It means we love the people on the inside.
Yeah. We are live in Congressman Matt Gaetz' office here in Washington, D.C. as we once again are covering the Supreme Court case that's in front of the court right now. Hopefully tomorrow we'll be live at 9:30 with a decision on that. What's your thoughts on that decision? I know that with the leak, it kind of gave an indication that it would be overturned, but you never know. I mean, you've got intimidation coming from the left, which you and I can both agree is just disgusting that these people are able to do what they do. But what's your thoughts on this case?
I would be very satisfied if the court did not change one comma in the leaked Dobbs decision, because I believe that Roe is bad science and bad law. And we know a lot more today about viability and about life and about heartbeats and about the ability of unborn life even to feel pain. And so I think that ought to inform our compassion and our love, and that juxtaposes with a viciousness on the other side that I think is very stark. I think that as this decision comes out, we ought to be filled with joy and compassion and opportunity. I mean, we think about what the human race has lost, what the American people have lost by all the unborn life that's been terminated. I mean, we could have had the person cure cancer, terminated as an unborn child. And so I am hopeful for this decision, but I don't want to be a reflection of what I see in the left. I want to be better than that. And frankly, it'd be nice if some of our law enforcement at the federal and state level stopped these intimidation marches outside the homes of justices.
Yeah, it's disgusting. And you've probably seen the video of them walking up and down the street there, banging their drums with their bullhorns, things like that. It's disgusting. And they'll be out there tomorrow Matt. I'm
Well, it's a
telling you.
threat. It's a straight
It's
threat.
a straight up threat. Yeah, and I was sharing with him my thoughts before we came on about the way they even approach a conservative news outlet like Right Side. I mean, they know exactly who we are, what we stand, and why we're there. And they're vicious, they're vile, and it's disgusting. And to be honest with you, I really cannot wait to see them melt down when that happens. I really, and I'm just saying, because they're finally going to. We knew this was going to happen, and thank God President Trump put the Supreme Court justices in place to be able to do this.
Well, the enduring legacy of the Trump administration, beyond a roaring economy, beyond a more focused foreign policy, will be the way he reshaped the federal bench, not just at the Supreme Court, but really all throughout the appellate courts and even at the trial level. It was remarkable, his ability to do that. And that's why, you see, when the left doesn't win by the normal rules, they move to intimidation, and then they try to change the rules. And now they're trying to pack the court, right? I mean, after this Dobbs decision comes down, if it is what the leak suggests that it might be, I really think you're going to see the left ramp up efforts to pack the court. And remember, we were the ones that were so damaging to institutions, and now they don't like the decision, and so they're going to add 27 more umpires.
Well, let's go a step further, Matt. There's a flag that's along Pennsylvania Avenue that has 51 stars in it, and it represents their desire, Mayor Bowser's, for a statehood, to be recognized. To me, that's disgusting that you just completely edit the U.S. American flag for your political agenda. It's just disgusting.
Well, people like Mayor Bowser don't think too much of America in the first place. I mean, they think America is built on hatred and racism and evil. And I believe America is the greatest society that has ever existed in all of human history. And so to us, that looks like disgracing the flag, dishonoring what we are as a union. But it probably doesn't mean very much to Mayor Bowser, because I don't know that she held our flag or our country in any reverence.
What is it like living here? And I asked Marjorie Taylor Greene the same question, and she's like, well, I try not to go. I fly in, I'll do my things, I fly back out. What is life like in D.C. for Matt Gaetz? I mean, do you go out to dinner in a public area? Do you go have a drink at Old Ebbitt's Grill and just throw an old-fashioned back and see your buddies there? I mean, do you socialize very much in this town?
Well, I spend most of my time with my wife, and I'm very blessed that she chooses to spend a lot of our non-working hours together. But I'm a happy warrior. I don't curl up, I don't hide, and when people have disagreement with me or hurl insults at me, it really doesn't affect my thinking on things, because I know who I work for. I know what my true north is. I know that the people of Northwest Florida deserve a fighter, and they have a view of America that is positive and that is encouraging. And I am here to advance that view. I'm here to convert others to that view, and I'm here to win their fights. Bottom line. And you know what? If there's some folks that don't like that and want to yell at me while I'm having a cocktail or enjoying dinner, then bring it.
Yeah, bring it. And I share Matt's vision on that as well. Bring it, because we're not intimidated at all. And I get stopped quite a bit, mostly oddly enough, in airports. A lot of patriots in airports, and they'll say, "Hey, Right Side, way to go, keep things up." And it is. You got to have a degree of patience when you're dealing with some of these people too, because it's just they hurl insults at you, and God bless you, because you and I both, I think we're gifted with the ability to take a deep breath and just let them go.
Oh yeah. Look, I this is a great country. It's worth fighting for. We can do this, and that fills me to the brim with optimism. And wherever the negativity comes from, I just don't let it distract us. I learned so much watching President Trump, because they tried everything with him. Destroy his family, destroy his presidency, destroy the institution of the presidency. And he remained focused on the job he had to do for the American people. And I try to use that as a guiding light.
And in your district, I would imagine a lot of your constituents talk about CRT in the schools, in the school districts. And let's talk a little bit about that, because I know that's a hot topic, especially going back to school this year. I've even had some parents say, look, I'm going to pull my kid out of public school and I'm going to homeschool him for the first time. Didn't think they could do that because they don't like the direction of some of these school districts.
Well, we're pretty lucky in Northwest Florida because we've got mostly Republican school superintendents, Republican members of the school board, and so we've been a little resilient to some of those forces elsewhere. But when there are concerns, I just lean toward parent empowerment. To me, I'm not concerned when you give parents more visibility into curriculum, more control over kind of the educational and learning experience, because that creates buy-in. My dad was a school superintendent, and he said that his biggest challenges were at schools where he just felt like the parents didn't care or didn't exist. The kids showed up on the bus, left on the bus, but you didn't have the room mom there. You didn't have the dad that was the assistant baseball coach that knew what everybody was up to. And when you do parent empowerment from the government side, you get this great dividend in buy-in and involvement. And I think that is the greatest antidote to the anti-American CRT and really some of the other bizarre stuff the left has tried to inject into the bloodstream of learning.
And it's great because Florida has really been one of those beacons in this country. I mean, Governor DeSantis has been amazing. You have been amazing. And it's just, you guys have really, you kind of shelled that ship through COVID.
Yeah.
Wisely.
Yeah.
To keep the state open for business and keep everybody healthy.
That was very important. And I think Governor DeSantis had the leadership skills to not just get into a reflexive hysteria like a lot of Republican and Democrat governors did in other places. And he looked at the potential downstream consequences if you don't have school children in an in-person learning environment. It's not just the curriculum that you learn in school. You learn social skills like, hey, you know what? You don't cut in line. Yeah. If you knock somebody during jump rope, they might knock you back. And there are things that you learn about the human existence that are very valuable and important and that are not really severable. And so I think that his appreciation for that did so much for the mental health of our students. It gave parents the opportunity to, I think, reintegrate their lives more quickly. It gave our businesses the ability to have a workforce that was ready to be reactivated. In a lot of these places, people that left the workforce never came back, over these long lockdowns. And so I'm very proud of the Florida model. I travel the country a lot too, and people always ask me, what's it like in Florida where you can have barbecues and hug your relatives? And then not a lot of people in Florida wish they were living in New Jersey. Of course. It's most of the people in New Jersey who wish they were Floridians, not the other way around.
It's incredible when you think back the Simon Says game that we went through, where if you walked into a restaurant, you had to have your mask on. You could walk 12 feet that way. But once you sat down, you could then take the mask off. And Matt, we fell for it. We fell for those shenanigans early on. Don't walk down the bread aisle this way. You have to come from the south end of the bread aisle because you can't meet head to head with somebody coming towards you. We fell for it once, but Matt,
what was the weirdest thing you did?
I honestly think it's the thing where you would walk into a restaurant and you'd go in like this, table for two, and then once you sit down, the mask can come off. Like all of a sudden.
Okay, so yes, the unspoken rule of the fact that if you were seated at a table, COVID wouldn't spread.
It's only 6 feet tall.
Yes, but if you were 18 inches away standing, it was the greatest threat in the world. I have an admission to make.
Okay.
At one point, I Lysoled a few packages.
Well, I think we all did, right?
Oh, I thought that was weird. I think Lysoling the packages is weirder than sitting down and taking the mask off. I mean, if you think about it now, we were Lysoling packages.
Yeah. Kid Rock did a great interview with Tucker Carlson talking about that. He Lysoled the crap out of everything, and he was touching them with kit gloves. And he was like, what am I doing?
Yes.
What am I doing?
Yes. You know what? Then we got Tiger King, and it held this country together.
It did.
For like 2 weeks.
Tiger King got us through the most difficult times in our country.
It was a common experience we all went through together.
Yeah, but I don't think it's ever going to happen. I've said, Matt, this is never going to happen again. I think the American people, they feel like they were fooled. Of course, it was new to us, so we all listened to what Dr. Fauci had to say. We all trusted Dr. Fauci, and we all tried to. Hey, remember? Give us 2 weeks, just 2 weeks. We're all this together. 2 weeks, we can do it. And then 2 weeks turned into much longer than that. And your kids were home doing Zoom courses for school. But I don't think we ever fall for this again. I really don't.
As my friend Thomas Massey says, with 2 weeks to slow the spread, it's always the first 15 months that hurts.
Yeah.
You know, Governor DeSantis told me that he thought the two enduring things that COVID would really impart on our politics. One, people would have a fundamental distrust of public health now because
Sure.
they'd been lied to so many times, because they detrimentally relied on things that later turned out to be untrue. And second, you could never again be a successful national American politician if you were trying to sell soft on China.
Yeah.
Like if you were selling the Chimerica dream, that if we could just bring China closer to us, they would act more like us.
Yeah.
You know, that was over in DeSantis's mind. And I think both of those points have been very salient and have borne true.
And I think President Trump reacted as he should in that administration by getting everything, the vaccine pushed through. I mean, whether how you feel about the vaccine, he did what he had to do at that particular moment. And I think.
I think most Americans are grateful for availability of vaccine. I think that, you know, if there had never been any vaccine invented, I don't know that we'd be in a stronger position as a country, but I think we totally abused the powers of government.
Correct.
From, you know, the people in Washington to woke governors, all the way down to the mayoral level, all the way down to the business level on these mandates. And it really, really was the improper way to try to, I think, you know, reap the benefits from something that could have turned out as a force for good. I think through the lens of these mandates, history will judge it otherwise.
I think so too. And thank God for Florida on that. All right, it's about 40 minutes past the hour here in Washington, D.C. Behind us, we still have the J6 hearings going on. If you miss it at the top of the show, they played a video montage of Matt Gaetz, Jim Jordan, and others talking about what they were going to do in terms of the electors. And let's kind of maybe recap that real quickly for some of our viewers that are just now joining us. Your response to being called out from the J6 Commission on this?
Well, the call out of me was that I suggested that I would object to electors from states that hadn't run clean elections. And remember, Brian, we had a circumstance in Pennsylvania where members of the elections kind of operation infrastructure went rogue, went beyond the authorities that were granted by the legislature to totally change the rules. I mean, Donald Trump was so good at politics in the Midwest, they literally had to change the rules to beat him. You know what I mean? And I don't think they did. And so the, you know, that was something that I think deserved debate. And the point I made earlier is that this happens all the time. The last Republican to be sworn in without Democrats objecting to some electors was George H.W. Bush. You know, both of George W. Bush's elections saw elector challenges, one in Florida, one in Ohio. And then of course, President Trump's first election, they were objecting to the state of Alabama. Jim McGovern from Massachusetts thought that the will of the voters of Alabama, who had I think chosen President Trump by an over 40 vote margin, that ought to be changed by a guy from Massachusetts, no less. And so I think we were taking a principled stand. I think we were prepared for debate and to lay out evidence, and that's what the Congress is for. It is not for violence. It is not for using physical might and power to overcome people. It is for debate and discussion and a vote, and that's what we sought on January 6th.
Yeah, and I think the American people, well, we know they're not watching. I know that PBS reported they were no longer going to stream this thing. They were going back to regular programming.
When you lose to Big Bird in the ratings, it is not ideal. When other programming at PBS is so compelling that Adam Kinzinger doesn't get the live stream there, it might be sending a message.
How true is that? That is so funny. But I mean, but that's all they're pounding right now. And I was watching all of the cable shows on the way here, and the only one that dipped out of the J6 discussion was Fox, and it was all about the economy, which I think, Matt, is what people are concerned about in national security, economy, their public safety, not January 6 hearings where people are falling asleep in the seats there.
I mean, I feel like we are living in the plot of The Lion King. Like, you know, I mean, when we had the
Yeah.
legitimate king with the great hair, like life was in balance. The kingdom was prosperous. Like there were hyenas, but we kind of kept them at
Sure.
bay and life was good. And then like the illegitimate ruler comes in, takes over, and now the hyenas are in charge. Like they
Yeah.
run the place, and now there's like despair and death. And I think a real national malaise that is even more encompassing than what America endured under Jimmy Carter.
Yeah. Okay. Let's fast forward to November 8th of this coming year. Your prediction as far as terms of, I said maybe 60 seats gets flipped. Is that conservative?
That's very optimistic, I think.
Okay.
I think that, you know, and some folks called me a political pessimist, but, you know, I think you don't count your chickens till they hatch. I think that in a lot of places in the country, there's still going to be very, very close elections. You know, 2 or 3 percentage points on kind of how people view Republicans versus Democrats could be the difference in 30 seats. So I could envision a world in which we have the type of majority that you describe. I could envision a world where maybe we have a 12, 13, 14, 15 seat majority. Yeah. Remember, a lot of these Democrats we got to beat in the upcoming midterm were elected in 2018. That was a kind of a blue wave year. And they have been reelected subsequently, including in the pretty good red year of 2020. Mm-hmm. And so these are hardened candidates. They've been going to ribbon cuttings and sending birthday cards for 6 years and
petting dogs and kissing babies.
Yeah, well, just because people are pissed at Joe Biden doesn't necessarily mean they're going to vote against, you know, Alyssa Slotkin in Michigan or Mikey Sherrill in New Jersey or Jared Golden in Maine. You know, I mean, those are all kind of frontline Democrat candidates that fit that mold, and you have to actually go beat these people. That's what democracy is about. You have to find compelling candidates with a strong connection to their voters, and you got to give those folks a chance to go and make their case in the American way.
And hopefully we've done a little bit of that today for independents that are watching us right now, because we're with you. The economy is tanking, and we feel like we're losing this country, and it's going to be interesting to see how many American flags line Pennsylvania Avenue this year, because I saw the Ukraine flag. I've seen plenty of pride flags in this town, and that's a whole nother show, man.
I mean, Trump had to bring back Christmas. I think in his first term. In his second term, he might have to bring back America.
We may have to.
Remember, I mean, nobody would even like talk about Christmas during the Obama years. And he's like, I will bring back Christmas. We'll have to bring back the flag, with 50 stars on it and bring back the country more broadly.
My goodness. All right. If you want to follow Matt and all the things that he's doing, not only on social media, but what he's doing in his district there in Florida, what is the best social media handles and the websites for that?
At Rep Matt Gaetz on just about any social media platform. Gaetz.house.gov is our congressional website where you can get important updates about legislation. And I've got a podcast called Firebrand that you can download on any of the podcast listening platforms of choice. And it's also live streamed from this seat, actually.
It's awesome.
On Rumble, which is really, really an exciting place. That's where I watch Right Side. I watch a lot of Right Side on Rumble.
I appreciate that. And let's talk just for a second about Rumble, because back in the day when we only had like one big streaming platform, if we said anything like Trump or any of the taboo words in social media, we got a strike. But those guys at Rumble stepped up, and they created such a platform that when we were able to shift our viewers over to Rumble, it held, and we have the record for the most concurrent views on Rumble and the biggest live stream on Rumble. So shout out to the guys at Rumble for creating that. Florida company there, eventually the Florida company.
Yeah, I think Sarasota is the ultimate home of those Canadians. So we welcome them, in the great tradition of Floridians welcoming the Canucks. But I think we're in a time where developing that robust ecosystem for communication is the resiliency against cancellation. You know, I think in this era of cancel culture, what the left hopes is that you'll self-censor, is that you won't say America first, you know, that you won't speak up for your values, that you'll just, you know, maybe those will be your own personally held beliefs. But I believe in political evangelism. I believe we have an obligation to go show people the light and to show them how our policies will actually make things better for our country. And so having that ecosystem of media that allows for free expression and free thought and exchange of ideas. It's critically important to be that armor against the cancel culture and against, I think, the natural gravity towards self-censorship.
Well, you know exactly what happened after January 6th is when they sent out a massive, I'm not going to say what streaming platform it was, sent out a massive email that said, do not say these words. This person is not allowed to ever exist on this platform again. That was incredible. And a lot of people, over 1 million people, were deplatformed instantly.
I don't think that makes America stronger.
No.
I think that this impulse to deplatform and cancel kind of arises from the ideology that the American is very weak and fragile, and that you're not smart enough to compare sources and to do your own research and to engage in analysis about what is true or false. You actually need the government or big tech to help you, to tell you what's true and false. And I just think that is so patronizing.
Yeah.
And I want to believe in the version of the American who is tough and strong and resilient. And of course, we're all going to encounter misinformation. I have MSNBC on right now. It is literally spewing information into the room that we occupy.
That's great.
But I don't worry that if it's on, that I'm going to become a leftist.
Yes.
just because I'm encountering their misinformation. I actually have enough confidence in myself. So I think we're all stronger when we assess sourcing, when we look at different arguments, and that's when the truth and that's when the best ideas can be like the cream rising to the top.
Yeah. The Babylon Bee was criticized because it's satire, but they're saying you're spreading misinformation. And it's through parody. It's through a joke.
Well, it's quite literally their business model. I mean, it's when you're a parody account, misinformation is the business.
Is the business.
Yeah, and so of course, the problem is for the Babylon Bee that it's becoming harder and harder to decipher satire from what we see from the Biden administration.
It's so true, because as soon as they do a piece, then maybe a week later it actually becomes reality.
Yes.
There. You can also follow us across our platforms as well on the Apple and Android platforms. Our app, RSBN app's a great way to got the app. You got to have it on your phone. Great way to view our rally, which, by the way, this weekend we are live in Illinois for President Trump having a nice little rally there. Hey, don't know if you have weekend plans. You got to go out to Illinois.
Well, I've got plans with my constituents in Northwest Florida on Saturday. Otherwise, I always love being with President Trump and with Representative Mary Miller. Illinois is a great state outside of Crook County.
Yeah.
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 When you get into the great parts of Illinois, great God-fearing, patriotic Americans, and frankly, they deserve better than the government that they get out of their state capital. And so I think President Trump will actually give people a lot of hope, and I think you're going to see that. I think you're going to see
turnout of hope.
The type of Trump rally you get in a blue state where people say, you know what, I'm not forgotten.
Mm-hmm. And I kind of feel sorry for people on the West Coast too, because I feel like they're forgotten. My son lives in Los Angeles, and I feel like he's like one of just a dozen people that are conservatives there, which we know that's not true. There's a lot of conservatives, but they are kind of forgotten though.
Yeah, and I think that being America first, as I am, has to mean that you want to lift up all Americans. I even want the woke-topian Joe Biden supporters who hate me to have better jobs and to have higher wages and to be more productive and prosperous. I wouldn't wish a life of sadness and despair and unproductivity on anybody. So, President Trump knew how to marshal that, how to bring resources home and how to make America a compelling place for investment. America was back under President Trump. And I guess it's what keeps me in this job, the belief that we can have that again. And as down as we are now, I think I watched on one of Chuck Todd's programs, him reflect with Susan Page that it's the lowest doldrums since the Civil War in America right now regarding how we think about ourselves. And so there's going to be a time for a fourth turning. There's going to be a time for kind of a new spirited leadership. And I know President Trump found that fire before, and then he can find it again, and he can lead us in that way.
Well, you have the fire without a doubt that President Trump has.
I'm the firebrand, man.
You are the firebrand.
That's my brand.
Our viewers absolutely love you. So make sure you follow Matt across his social media platforms. How often is your podcast pushed out, by the way?
I tell you what, when we're in session, we try to put it out at least every other day to keep people up to date about what's going on in the committee hearings, how it affects them. So we go live usually between about noon and 1 and give people a thorough report on legislation, appropriations, and different things kind of affecting the decision making around here.
I like the way that new media has made its way into politics here. Because remember, if you go back in the days, you had to wait till the news at 4, 5, 6, and 10 to get that soundbite you hope you got from your.
Well, you know who that empowered? The leadership. I mean,
Yeah.
It used to be in Congress, if you wanted to give an interview on television, you actually had to have your leadership approve it because they're who the bookers talk to at the only places you could get your message out. You know, I think you texted the office and we got you in right away.
This is great.
And we didn't require any permission
Yeah.
from any leadership to be able to have a conversation directly
Good
with
point.
people. And what it does is it gets rid of the filter. You know, the American people want the truth and they want it directly. So whether it's MTG Live or my podcast Firebrand or these like very, behind the scenes, in the room interviews that you bring people, I think it makes folks feel connected and involved. And that's what we're going to need to harness to get the energy behind our America First agenda.
I love it. And of course, you can go to our website, rsbnetwork.com, and sign up for our newsletter as well. Grace Saldana, Alex Caldwell, Summer Lane. We've got a staff of great writers there that will push out the topics that you want to know about. So put your email address. We're not going to sell your information. We're not going to ship it off to China, have anybody do anything like that. But it's absolutely free, by the way. Do that. We admire what you do for this country. And the state of Florida, you were lucky to have this man representing you. And I'll be down in your neck of woods before too long.
We hope you spend a lot of money.
That my wife will do, I'm sure.
Wonderful. We'll bring her and tell her to treat herself.
Yeah, there you go. Closing thoughts as we say goodbye.
Hey, don't lose hope.
Yeah.
Let's go get them. Let's understand what we're going through, but let's also understand the chapter of the movie we're in. This isn't the end. America's coming back. And you know what? There's no cavalry coming for you. It's got to be the people that are watching right side. It's got to be the people that really have been the fuel for this America First movement that drive us to our greatest successes.
I'll leave you on that note. Live from Washington, D.C., Matt Gaetz, Brian Glenn saying so long. We'll see you back here tomorrow.